When it comes to horror games, or games that mess with their players, you have to consider a lot of factors, such as atmosphere, level of annoyance when you die, as well as the mechanics that your players will be trudging through. You need to have a good balance in order to keep your audience's attention, as well as making sure the gameplay is enthralling. And, well, that's how exactly I would describe Inscryption. Developed by Daniel Mullen Games, a name that many people in the indie industry might be familiar with as the creative mind behind Pony Island, a game that thoroughly messed with the player's head with its gameplay and meta concept. Inscryption takes a similar route, but has a much more focused aspect on the gameplay. When you first start up the game, you're met with this.
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing.
It's a weird opener to be sure, but we haven't really started this game and we're already met with some strange guy along with a boot up sound effect. You then get to the menu where you try to start a new game, but you're unable to. The icon is physically not there. So we do the only thing we can, and click continue, and... So, this right off the bat, you're unsettled. The first person's perspective adding to the atmosphere of the game. If you're playing this game, I highly suggest you play this part with the lights off at night. Really gets the atmosphere going if you're looking for a creepy vibe. But then something weird happens. As you're questioning what's going on, this mysterious pair of eyes goes on to give you a deck of cards with fuzzy animals on them. Okay then! Look, most of you who are watching this video are probably already well aware of what Inscryption is, and if you are, I appreciate you putting up with me being a little dramatic as I talk about the game that I really do enjoy, both from an atmospheric and gameplay perspective. I've always been a fan of card games, most notably Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Pokemon varieties, but to me they kinda evolved too fast, and games, especially with Yu-Gi-Oh! Have gone a major power creep where it's gone to the point you probably have to shell a ton of cash in order to be somewhat competitive. So when I first got into playing Inscryption's simple yet very in-depth card game mechanics, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time playing the usual card games as of late. I was having fun. Like, yes, there's a lot of strategies and depth into Inscryption, but when it's you against this shadowy figure, and I'm just gonna say his name, Leshy, with the AI being somewhat competent and there being a focus on card choices and deck balancing, as well as what items you have, what totem you've got stacked up, and other various factors, I don't know, it just reminded me of a more simplistic version of those old Yu-Gi-Oh! Game Boy Advance games where you'd go up against computer of the game with your pre-made deck, and I loved those titles while I was growing up. The game is simple at the beginning of the game, as it should. You have two decks, a main monster deck and a side deck full of squirrels.
I'm king of the squirrels!
Fun little side note, I actually watched Markiplier's playthrough of this game and I had to wince at the big mistakes he was making with his gameplay.
I don't like how much dablage those coyotes do.
Most notably, the last couple chapters of the game where he had no idea what card efficiency was.
Can't even play. I have so many 6 energy cards, I can't do anything.
You start each turn drawing from either deck. You basically place down monsters on the board, sacrificing other monsters to bring out bigger and badder ones. And yeah, I'm using the term monster because some of these cards can be rather unsettling. Still, each of these monsters have their strengths and weaknesses, and some of them have abilities thanks to their sigils. If you manage to get the right cards and luck, you can make something really broken. When the KC's mod came out, I essentially managed to pull an insect totem that allowed me to produce an exact copy of my insect cards. If you run an ant deck, you'll essentially never have to worry about resources since they'll constantly spawn in your hand. You might have noticed something that I said, if you manage to get the right cards and luck. Because yeah, it wouldn't be a card game without some level of randomization, and that can actively suck the fun out of a run because you'll be given options on a map path that can give you cards, and sometimes you get some really good cards, and other times you get jack shit. But hey, that's part of the charm of these games, especially with the addition of Casey's mod, where not only a ton of new cards were introduced, like holy hell, I love the Dire Wolf. I really wish these cards were in the main game, or that there was a chance to actively manage your deck. Once a card is in your deck, it is in there for that run. Now, before you type in, yes, I'm aware there are ways to remove cards from your deck in a run. You sacrifice cards in order to get a bone boon, or sacrifice a card with a sigil to put it onto another card. But imagine if you had more control of your deck, or could have a side deck that you could put cards you didn't want into it. There are also times in the game does pull some bullshit, like when you're playing the main story, Leshy will summon a ton of bears just to stop you, and those things have some monstrous stats. Granted, there are ways around this too. If you've got the right setup, you can possibly beat Leshy on a first run in the story. My point is that there's some bullshit. But hey, there's always some bullshit in games I usually play. At least Leshy doesn't take 10 minutes to spam special summons to his side of the field while I'm waiting to draw my first frickin' card. Isn't that right, Yu-Gi-Oh?! The point is, the game is strong, but it does have its flaws when you can find any sort of card. Not to mention, there are builds where you draw the right card, it's automatically win the game card. Whether it's because you powered up a low/no cost card with campfires, or got a souped up Ouroboros card, which is arguably one of the best cards in the entire game since whenever it dies it powers up and puts the card right back on it. And put the right sigil on it, and you've got a winning combo.
That's what I like to see. I love to see that.
It's a toss-up at times, and sometimes it doesn't matter if skill is part of the equation. Partially, I think it's good to have some randomness in games like this, but considering how the game can utterly F you over at times, I'd be lying if it didn't make me tear my hair out when I'm doing a great run. I literally had to break the game a few times and managed to get a build that essentially allowed me to break everything. And hey, that's pretty fun game design where it's a toss-up between this awesomeness with these big numbers to the point of...
Great! You owe me a TV, mate.
There are so many ways to get a broken deck. I personally like having my insects, especially the ants that have the ability to produce another copy of themselves in my hand. You essentially have countless resources, and every time a creature dies you get a bone token. And since most ant cards are a single tribute, you can keep tributing one ant on the field and have as many bone tokens as you wanted. These bone tokens are used to summon other cards, and you can find some interesting ones, even more so in Casey's mod. Now, I've been spending a lot of time about the game's mechanics and gameplay, and I have to say, it's the gameplay that I truly fell in love with this game. It made my heart of stone shatter in half and erupt into a fire. That made me get back into my love for card games. So, thanks Inscryption, because of you, I'm now back into the money sinkhole that is Yu-Gi-Oh! Oh god, Master Duel, I must refrain from using my most powerful card in that game. But since we've been talking about the gameplay itself, what do I think about the story? Well, Chapter 1 is really creepy and has a lot of amazing foreshadowing. Inscryption has a bit of a meta ARG style of storytelling. We are following Luke Carter, the lucky Carter, who's a card game channel who discovers a cursed floppy disk in the woods after a card had coordinates written on it that he found in a pack at a garage sale. Creepypasta, anyone? Look, I know until Master Duel came out, Yu-Gi-Tubing wasn't all that enthralling, but getting a demonic game... Yeah, no, now that I think about it, that seems right up the alley of Yu-Gi-Tubing. If you manage to follow the clues, you'll gain access to interesting cards. Cards that talk. Although the Stoda's a bit of a smartass, not every play is a mistake, you little rat. But eventually you'll outsmart Leshy and use his camera on him, turning him into a card, and you'll have the ability to start a new game, and... Now, I know this is a pretty contentious part of the game. A lot of people from what I've seen online that reached this part have been a bit hesitant about this shift in quality. And to be fair, I understand where they're coming from. I don't agree with it fully, but considering that atmosphere and introduction to new mechanics in the card game, it's really understandable that a lot of people can be turned off from this. The dreary and dark atmosphere that was in the first chapter is gone, and while I'll always be a fan of pixel art, even I have to admit that this change in style can be a bit jarring. I'm not saying it's bad, but the change in graphics and how the gameplay evolves can really take a player by surprise, even more so than normal. Hell, losing a game in this doesn't automatically reset you, you just lose and you can challenge the person again. We learn more about the 4 card scribes in the game, and we learn they each have a particular style, which is fine, but at the same time, looking at how they took Gramora's bone summoning aspect and put into Leshy's game, I kinda wish they had done that with the other styles of gameplay, namely the crystals and energy summoning. At least a variation of the two, so that way the players could have a more in-depth idea on how to play with those types of decks before this section. Throwing players into the deep end of a few new systems after they have gotten used to the current one does run the risk of alienating new players. So after you defeat the 4 scribes, you then enter the 3rd chapter, where we're back to the 3D graphics and we're faced against PO3, the living computer who again changes up the gameplay, who also used to be the Stoat. Jackass. And while it does have a similar vibe to that of Leshy's chapter, you can tell there's a lot of differences. Whereas Leshy was a creative soul who was willing to roleplay as the boss for the first chapter, PO3 lacks that. Sure, his gameplay might be a bit more solid, focusing on the energy summoning, but that requires you to wait a turn to accumulate up to 6 energies, which is fine, but considering that there's so much slower mechanic here, especially at the beginning to play actually useful cards, again, I understand why people are turned away. I don't fully agree with it, since in and of itself are interesting card battles and fun to play, and the bosses, while intriguing to offer different challenges, like the boss that takes files from your game and stop looking at the screen, you do not need to see what's in my folders! Or the boss where you make your own conditions. There's things to find enjoyable here in this section, and I've been pretty vague with more details since there's a lot to talk about concerning the story of the game, which I refuse to spoil any more than I already have. And it's at this point my editor would like to say a few things, mainly because I'm the guy who got him hooked into this game, and he's totally not holding me up by gunpoint to include this section.
Heyo, I'm Wave Runner. I've edited some videos on this channel and slapped in a couple of funnies. If any of you know me personally, you know I like to overthink things. And Inscryption is no different. Not only did the gameplay enthrall me, I'm quite a fan of reptile decks, with Skink being my favorite card mechanically, it's actually given me a deeper respect for card games as a whole. I've actually gotten into Yu-Gi-Oh! For the first time when Master Duel came out, and with a friend's help was able to build a pretty solid Infinitrack Machina deck. But I'm not here to geek out over gameplay, I'm here to talk story. Now, honestly, I'm not too big a fan of the underlying story of Inscryption. It's definitely interesting at times, but honestly feels like an above-average creepypasta. Like, look, they literally have Hitler here. Everything done in the game world is pretty solid, but the live-action segments are where things fall apart for me. I appreciate the extra effort to film live-action segments, but honestly, sometimes less is more. I mean, look at this.
Oh.
You know the luckycarter@gmail.com?
Yeah, you know what? That's, I am Luke Carter, but that's not my email address.
Because I just noticed because I've seen your videos.
Oh.
I'm a big fan.
Great. You owe me a TV, Tatiana.
The real gold in this narrative lies in the relationships between the scribes. Grimora and Magnificus are fascinating. As someone who represents death, Grimora ends up being the most friendly of the scribes, with her actions ending up arguably being the most selfless in the story. Magnificus, on the other hand, contrasts her by being this wise, benevolent wizard, but actually being a cruel and abusive teacher underneath, torturing his students with pointless suffering in order to prove some vague worthiness. It's quite fitting his cards are some of the most obtuse to use in the game. But the main shining attraction of Inscryption are the first 2 characters you meet in the game, though you don't know their true names right away. Leshy, the game master of the first part of the game, and PO3, introduced as the Stoat, who takes control in the latter half. Their relationship is what hit a chord with me the most, with their personalities instantly creating a fun contrast between them. Leshy is all about showmanship, focused on crafting a blood-curdling adventure through the wilderness. Though mainly portrayed through cards and masks, Leshy creates many intense conflicts, and has a cast of many colorful characters. He also constantly bends and breaks the rules of the game in order to keep up tension, most famously when he spawns a horde of bears if you play his game too fast. PO3, on the other hand, instantly makes an impression as the Stoat as a sarcastic asshole. He's focused on the gameplay side of the card game, giving you advice during boss battles, and chastising you if you make a play he doesn't like. When he takes over as Game Master, it's clear he's just pulling a robo post-apocalypse story out of his ass. Mostly concerned with you optimizing your deck and completing his tasks for his own end goals. In the pixelated portion of the game, this contrast between the two becomes much more obvious when you realize Leshy represents nature and PO3 technology. Heck, PO3's disregard for the life of his own subordinates shows just how little he cares about his own world, only how optimized his deck is. It then becomes clear why Leshy made PO3 the Stoat when he took over the game. It's the ultimate punishment for someone concerned with being the best at the game, by making him the weakest card. We also get to see a part of PO3 that he locked away in his quest for optimization. Golly, who is filled with much joy and wonder as she experiences the joys of discovery on the internet. Towards the end of the story, there's the implication that PO3 found some joy in exploring his creativity, though at that point it's too late to change, as the great transcendence has been set in motion. The biggest tragedy of both Leshy and PO3 is that they end up becoming two sides of the same coin, that being the downfall of Inscryption itself. Both are obsessed with their own ideology on how the game should be played. Leshy is obsessed with telling his story his way, and PO3 with his gameplay optimization. They end up becoming blind to the actual underlying issues plaguing their own world, the evil entity known as Odata. In an ironic twist as well, both of their games end up being plagued by the ideologies of the other, which becomes clear when you pay attention to what genres their games end up taking the form of. Leshy's game is a roguelike, based around constantly replaying the same randomly generated game, gaining skills, knowledge, and some limited upgrades in order to reach the end. The map layout instantly brings to mind Slay the Spire, a fellow deck-building roguelike, and it shares many risk-reward decisions present in many other roguelikes. While many roguelikes do have an underlying story and lore to discover, the main appeal of them is their gameplay, and optimizing the perfect overpowered build in order to get to the end, much like what PO3 is aiming for. PO3's game ends up acting like a Souls-like, a long trek through a small world with many difficult foes to overcome. Upon death, you lose all your currency and must survive to the point you die to get it back. But otherwise, you keep everything you accrued as you become more powerful. Though difficulty in min-maxing is what the Souls/Born/Ring series is most famous for, each game is also rich with hidden lore to be found through a variety of avenues. Though PO3 tried to keep his story simple, his part of the game has tons of hidden story bits, through the tarot cards, Mycologist, and Slime Jar. Though PO3 would hate to admit it, his game is just as intriguing story-wise as it is gameplay-wise. The ongoing conflict of story versus gameplay in video games is brilliantly represented through the age-old nature versus technology metaphor, and the story's outcome seems to suggest that the best outcome is when both aspects work in harmony rather than in conflict. Good stories and good gameplay can coexist, and it's not bad to prefer one over the other, as long as you don't try to destroy the other. And thankfully, with the existence of Casey's mod, it seems both Leshy and PO3 are getting their ideal world. Leshy can tell his endless story, and have some fun lore tidbits on the side, while PO3 can witness the player aim for perfect optimization in the face of many complex challenges. Truly, even the lowly stoat serves a purpose, if you literally play your cards right. If you want to hear me ramble about video games again, I stream on Twitch at Fanfico Entertainment. I've actually been streaming through Inscryption, and you can check it out through the YouTube archive, in the link in the description. Hope you enjoyed my little observation of a game I love. Now back to you, Carmen. You get to live another day. This is for the 2 High Guardian Spice videos you made me edit.
So, regardless of what my editor and I say, I do suggest you guys at least check out the game. Not just for the fun gameplay, especially considering the roguelike Casey's mod that was added and adds a lot more playing in Leshy's segment, but also the fact that the game is good. Really good. It's worth your time and money to enjoy the game and mechanics. And hey, if there's one thing I can say, there's really a healthy community around this game, to the point where they're adding mods that allow you to fight other scribes like Gromora. And I have to say, while a little rough, the creators of that do a good job with it. Not to mention all the custom cards and abilities that mods have added, the game's worth your time for the additional fan-made content. I don't think it's controversial for me to say this game is good, and you guys should check it out. After all, YouTubers like Markiplier and Moist Critical have made videos about this game talking about it. Woo! Yeah, baby! And it's got a lot of secrets to it. Granted, most of the fanbase has already solved a lot of the mysteries, and my big dumb YouTuber brain isn't big enough to talk about it and give it the respect it deserves without coming off as an egotistical dumbass taking credit for the work I didn't do. And I don't feel like getting a baseball bat to the back of my head from Redders. It's not Tuesday yet. But yeah, so what's on the agenda next for reviews? God damn it.
I'm having him attack a card I put on the field myself. The Moon!